Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama-shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnana-anjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya-manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Padantikam Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 8, Manifestation of Brahma from Vishnu. We are in the first section of this chapter. So this chapter describes about Lord Brahma's birth, his endeavors to understand about himself, then he is performing tapasya, and then receiving beautiful darshan of Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. So this chapter has 4 sections. We are in the first section. Section 1 to 9, text 1 to 9, is disciplic succession of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. We have seen that there are 2 disciplic successions of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam which are explained up till now. The one we already know, Lord Krishna explaining to Brahmaji, Brahmaji explaining to Narada, Narada explaining to Vyasa, Vyasa explaining to his own son Shukadev Goswami, Shukadev Goswami explaining to Parikshit Maharaj and Suta Goswami, and later Suta Goswami explaining to sages of Naimisharanya. And this is being recorded as Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Here is the another parampara which is we are discussing here is Lord Sankarshana explaining Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam to Sanat Kumar, Sanat Kumar explaining to Sankhyayana Muni, Sankhyayana Muni explaining to Parashara Muni and Brihaspati, and later Parashara Muni explaining to Maitreya, and Maitreya now explaining this to Vidura. So these are the 2 classical paramparas till now we have discussed of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So this is text 1 to 9. Text 10 to 14, Maitreya describes the reawakening of the creation. So he resumes the description of the creation. Previously, the creation was being described, and then there was a slight detour, and now he continues from that point on, from 10 to 14. Text 15 to 23, this section is about Brahma's birth and his search for the absolute truth. And then here we'll see Brahma's birth. Brahmaji is moving up and down across the navel, across the stem of the lotus, trying to understand who he is, who this lotus, what this lotus is, what is the purpose of life is. And then he hears these 2 words, tapa, tapa, and then he performs 100 celestial years of tapasya. Being pleased with the tapasya, this we have already seen in the 2nd canto. The Supreme Lord, he first sees Mahavishnu, and then in his meditation, and when he opens his eyes, he suddenly sees the Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu also, on whose navel the stem of the lotus has come. He is sitting on the top of the lotus, and from the top of the lotus, he sees below, he sees the beautiful darshan of Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. And that darshan is explained in the 4th section of this chapter, text 24 to 33, beautiful darshan of Lord Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu, as it was seen by Lord Brahma sitting on the top of the lotus. Right, so very beautiful chapter this is. So currently we are in the section 1 where there is the disciplic succession is being mentioned here. Text 8. Sakhyayana paramaham samukhyo vivikshamaano bhagavat vibhuti jagadasosmad guravenvitaya parasharayat bruhaspatescha. Translation.
The great sage Sankhayana was the chief amongst the transcendentalists, and when he was describing the glories of the Lord in terms of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it so happened that my spiritual master Parashara and Brahaspati both heard him. Hare Krishna.
So when first Lord Sankarshana explained this to Sanat Kumar, and Sanat Kumar explained this knowledge to Sankhayana Muni that we have seen in text 7. Now the Sankhayana Paramahamsa Mukhyo. Sankhayana is one of the chief transcendentalists, Paramahamsa Mukhyo. And therefore Srimad Bhagavatam is also called as Paramahamsa Samhita, right? Because this is the literature meant for the Paramahamsas. And he described this knowledge in terms of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam to Parashara Muni and Brihaspati. So this is how this knowledge came from Sankhayana Muni to Parashara Muni and Brihaspati. Text 9. Text 9 is an extremely beautiful shloka, and here very beautiful mood of compassion and love of Maitreya Muni you can feel from this shloka. Provacha mayyam sadayalurukto muni pulassena purana madhyam soham tavaitat kathayami vatsa shraddhalave nityamanuvrataya. Translation.
Translation. The great sage Parashara, as aforementioned, being so advised by the great sage Pulastya, spoke unto me the foremost of the Puranas, Bhagavatam. I shall also describe this before you, my dear son, in terms of my hearing, because you are always my faithful follower. Purport. The great sage of the name Pulastya is the father of all demonic descendants. Once upon a time, Parashara began a sacrifice in which all the demons were to be burned to death because his father had been killed and devoured by one of them. The great sage Vasishtha Muni arrived at the sacrifice and requested Parashara to stop the deadly action, and because of Vasishtha's position and respect in the community of sages, Parashara could not deny the request. Parashara having stopped the sacrifice, Pulastya, the father of the demons, appreciated his Brahmanical temperament and gave the blessing that in the future he would be a great speaker on the Vedic literatures called the Puranas, the supplements of the Vedas. Parashara's action was appreciated by Pulastya because Parashara had forgiven the demons out of his Brahmanical power of forgiveness. Parashara was able to demolish all the demons in the sacrifice, but he considered demons are so made that they devour living creatures, men and animals, but why on that account should I withdraw my Brahmanical qualification of forgiveness? As the great speaker of the Puranas, Parashara first of all spoke on the Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Purana because it is the foremost of all the Puranas. Maitreya Muni desired to narrate the same Bhagavatam we had heard from Parashara, and Vidura was qualified to hear it because of his faithfulness and his following the instructions received from superiors. So, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam was being narrated from time immemorial by the disciplic succession even before the time of Vyasadeva. The so-called historians calculate the Puranas to be only a few hundred years old, but factually, the Puranas existed from time immemorial before all historical calculations by the mundaners and speculative philosophers. Hare Krishna.
Provacha mayyam sadayalurukto. And the same, the great sage Sankhayana, he explained this to Parashara, and now Parashara Muni explained this to me, Maitreya Muni says, out of great compassion, Dayalurukto. Why did he speak? He was so advised by and blessed by Muni Pulatsya. Muni Pulatsya Purana Madhyam. And the same Srimad Bhagavatam here, Maitreya Muni says, Soham Tavaitat Kathayami Vatsa. Oh, my dear Vidura Vatsa. Beautiful words here. I will explain you the same Srimad Bhagavatam, Shraddhalave Nityamanuvrataya, because you are such a sincere follower. Great sage Parashara advised by great sage Pulasya, spoke this foremost of the Purana Madhyam, unto me, Maitreya Muni, and I will also describe this Bhagavatam unto you because you are such a sincere follower. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes the story why did Pulasya advise Parashara Muni to speak Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So there is a great sage, Parashara Muni. He is the same Parashara Muni who is father of Vedavyas, who has defined this Aishwaryasya, Samagrasya, defined the definition of Bhagavan is given by Parashara. So Parashara Muni Parashara Muni's father was killed by the demons. And Parashara Muni became extremely angry with the demons, and he decided not only the demon who killed, the entire demon as a race he wants to destroy. You know that the modern day very famous term for this is genocide. Okay, so he became so angry that he decided to destroy entire demon as a class from the universe. That was the potency of Parashara. And but then Parashara Muni was approached by Vasishtha Muni, who is a great respectable position in the Muni communities, in the very very respectable sage, and he says, "My dear Parashar, why you are performing such a deadly action of destroying all of them, the demons? Even they are the creations of the Lord, and they are undergoing their own karmic reactions and the desires, and that is within the plan of the Lord." And Parashara Muni could not deny the request of Vasishtha Muni. He controlled his anger. And Parashara Muni thought, if the demons are so made to devour the living creatures, men and animals, why on that account I should give up my Brahminical qualifications, my Brahminical nature? And thus he decided to refrain from his yagya. And this refrain pleased the father of the demons, who is Pulatsya, right? You know, Ravana's father is Pulatsya. So, and then Pulatsya Muni, who himself is a great sage, he blessed Parashara Muni that you will become the foremost speaker on the Puranas, the supplementary to the Vedas. And when thus inspired by Pulatsya Muni, Parashara began to speak, he started his narration with Purana Madhyam, the first Purana, that is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Adya, the topmost of the Purana, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And Parashara Muni happened to speak when Maitreya Muni was there. And this is how Maitreya Muni received the knowledge of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from Parashara Muni. Coming to the example of the genocide, okay, there are many such examples in Bhagavatam. Janmejaya, when he heard that the snake Takshaka was biting Parikshit Maharaj, Janmejaya became extremely angry, and he decided that he loved his father so much, Parikshit Maharaj, that he decided that he will destroy all the snakes. And he just started that the Naga Yagya, where he was just destroying all the snakes. And one point of time he wanted to destroy now Takshaka, and he just pulled by his mantra. He asked his brahmanas, Takshakaya Swaha. And then Takshaka, that time he became very afraid, and he had taken shelter of Indra. You know that Takshaka and Indra, they are very close friends. And he had taken shelter at the throne of the Indra, and Takshaka was not falling. And the brahmanas said, my dear Janmejaya, Takshaka has been given shelter by Indra, and that's why Takshaka is not falling in the sacrifice. And Janmejaya said, Takshakaya Swaha, Indraya Swaha. And the Brahmana spoke that mantra, Indraya Swaha. And the potency of the mantra was so much that Takshaka, along with Indra and his Sinhasan, started to fall inside the Yagya Kunda. And then there was a hahakar in the universe. And then Brahmaji came, and Brahmaji said, my dear Janmejaya, we understand you love your father so much, but this is not the way, my dear son, to take the revenge. So let whatever has happened till now, let that happen. And you please stop your yagya here only. And Janmejaya could not say no to the request of Brahmaji. So this is one example. There is another example like this, where Dhruva Maharaj, he was so angered when his Uttara was, his brother Uttama was killed by Yakshas. He just went to Alankapuri, Yakshapuri, and just started destroying all the Yakshas. This beautiful pastime will come, extremely beautiful pastime of how Dhruva became extremely angry. This is after his enlightenment. and he was just destroying all the, the extreme destruction that he started with yakshas. And then there suddenly Manu, his forefather and other great sages, they approached and they said, "Oh, Dhruva, why you are destroying all the yakshas? One yaksha killed your one brother and you are so angry. My dear son, this much anger doesn't befit you." And then Dhruva, he just became very pleased, very obliged by the request of Manu. He stopped this attempt of, when you say that genocide, we should remember these pastimes of Bhagavatam. And and that pleased the Yaksha Devata, who is the controller of the Yakshas, that is Kuberji. And Kubera personally approached along with Manu, and he said, "I am extremely pleased, my dear Dhruva, by your restraint and by your obedience. Please ask me benediction." Now here is Kubera, who is the Khajanji of demigods, asking Dhruva, "Ask me a benediction." And Dhruva is praying extremely beautiful prayers there, that please ensure that my devotional service unto the Supreme Lord remains ahaituki apratihata, and in a very steadfast devotion. This is the second example. There is another example where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he saw the devotees were beaten up by the Yavanas, exactly what's happening in Bangladesh, right? And this happened in Paschim Bengal 500 years ago. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he approached, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became so angry. Mahaprabhu said that not only these Yavanas, Yavana as a race I will destroy. This happened just 500 years ago. And then Nityanand Prabhu and others, they said, "My dear Lord, your incarnation is not to destroy the demons. Your incarnation is to purify them in Kali Yuga, whom all you will destroy. So please, my dear Lord, don't be in the Vishnu form. Please be in the form of Namo Mahavadanyaya." And this is how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu allowed that race to continue, and he did not destroy the Yavana as the race. Right? So sometimes when we hear such things, the atrocities being performed, we have that extreme angry mood. But that mood was controlled here by Parashara Muni, and Parashara Muni, and this control on the request of Vasishtha Muni, and this control pleased the Pulatsya Muni, and Pulatsya Muni gave him benediction that he will become the foremost of the speaker of the Puranas. And this is how Pulatsya Muni spoke this to Maitreya Muni. And Maitreya Muni says, "My dear Vatsa, my dear Vidura, I will speak same Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam unto you." And Maitreya Muni desired to narrate the same Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So Prabhupada says Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is age old. Sometimes you may just try to find out what is the age of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Typically this Bhandarkar people, okay, the Prachya Vidya kind of guys. They want to say that, oh, this Purana is a 2000-year-old, Bhagavatam is 800-year-old, and this Purana, we see the Sanskrit of Bhagavatam, and it goes by this style and that style. But here, the origin of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is directly from Lord Krishna in one parampara, and in another parampara, it is directly from Lord Sankarshan, where Sanat Kumar is hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from the bottom of the universe, right? So Prabhupada says such stupid attempts to calculate the dates of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam by the mundaners and the speculative philosophers is very futile. They will not understand Bhagavatam without understanding this in disciplic succession. Text 10. Now we enter the next section of Bhagavatam, text 10 to 14, where Maitreya describes the reawakening of the creation. So Maitreya Muni again starts describing the process of creation. Up to the manifestation of the universe is already discussed. 23 elements forming of the universe is discussed. It is also discussed that Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu, he is expanding himself as Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. And now after that, what happens is being resumed from this point on. Right. So this is the further explanation from that point where this is, this discussion has previously happened. So this is text 10. Udaplutam vishvamidam tadyasid. Text 10, yeah, yes.
Translation.
Yanidrayami litah drik militanyan अहीन्द्रतल्पे दिशयान एक कृतक्षणस्मारतौ स्वात्मरतौ निरीह. Translation.
At a time when the three worlds were submerged in water, Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu was alone, lying on his bedstead and great snake Ananta. And although he appeared to be in the slumber in his own internal potency, free from the action of the external energy, his eyes were not completely closed. Purport. The Lord is eternally enjoying transcendental bliss by his internal potency, whereas the external potency is suspended during the time of the dissolution of the cosmic manifestation.
Yeah. So at that time, now the description of the universe and further that continues. At that time, when the three worlds were submerged in the water, Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu was alone. On his bedstead, the great snake Ananta. His eyes not completely closed. He was in his own trance, that is Yoga Nidra. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, the Lord is eternally enjoying transcendental bliss, whereas his extended potency is suspended during this time. And this is the time we are discussing about. So here in this text, Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu is laying in the water of dissolution. This is the Garbhodak water. And where are all the living entities? All the living entities are sucked in their subtle bodies along with their karmas, and they are within the navel of the Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. Right? So jivas in their subtle bodies along with their karmas, they are in the navel of Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. And now Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu is going to push through all the all the living entities, and on the top now Brahma is going to take birth. So this is the point that is this happening. Text 11. सोऽन्तःशरीरेऽर्पितभूतसूक्ष्म कालात्मिकं उदिरायणाः उवास तस्मिन् सलिले पदे स्वे यथा नलो दारुणिरुद्धवीर्यः. Translation.
Just like the strength of fire within fuel wood, the Lord remained within the water of dissolution, submerging all the living entities in their subtle bodies. He lay in the self-invigorated energy called Kala. Purport: after the three worlds, the upper, lower, middle, and middle planetary systems merged into the water of dissolution, the living entities of all the three worlds remained in their subtle bodies by dint of the energy called Kala. In this dissolution, the gross bodies became unmanifest, but the subtle bodies existed, just like the water of the material creation. Thus, the material energy was not completely wound up, as is the case in the full dissolution of the material world. Hare Krishna.
So at that time, it's like the strength of the fire is within the fuel wood. So there is a fire in the wood, but the fire is not manifested. Similarly, the Lord remained within the water of dissolution, and the living entities remained in their subtle bodies along with their karmas. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, this is the partial dissolution and not the complete total dissolution. And here, in this dissolution, the living entities remained in the subtle bodies. So the subtle elements were present. Prabhupada says that not that the material energy was completely wound up, as it happens at the full dissolution of the material creation. That is when the Lord Mahavishnu inhales inside, then everything goes, so this is not that phase of dissolution. Here the subtle bodies, the living entities remained in their subtle bodies, Sukshma Sharira, along with their karmas. Text 22. Text 12, sorry. चतुर्युगानां च सहस्रमप्सु स्वया उदिरतया स्वशक्त्या कालाख्यया आसि तत्कर्म तन्त्रो लोकान् पितान् ददृशे स्वदेहे. Translation.
The Lord lay down for 4,000 yuga cycles in his internal potency, and by his external energy, he appeared to be sleeping within the water. When the living entities were coming out for further development of their fruitive activities, actuated by the energy called Kala Shakti, he saw his transcendental body as bluish. Purport. In the Vishnu Puran, Kala Shakti is mentioned as avidya. The symptom of the influence of the Kala Shakti is that one has to work in the material world for fruitive results. The fruitive workers are described in the Bhagavad Gita as mudhas or foolish. Such foolish living entities are very enthusiastic to work for some temporary benefit within the perpetual bondage. One thinks himself very clever throughout his life if he is able to leave behind him a great asset of wealth for his children. And to achieve this temporary benefit, he takes the risk of all sinful activities, without knowledge that such activities will keep him perpetually bound by the shackles of material bondage. Due to this polluted mentality and due to material sins, the aggregate combination of living entities appeared to be bluish. Such an impetus of activity for fruitive result is made possible by the dictation of the external energy of the Lord, Kala.
The Lord lay down for the Chatur-yuganam cha Sahasramapsu, for the 4,000 yuga cycles in his internal potency. And by his external potency, he appeared to be sleeping within the water. When the living entities were coming out for the further development of their fruitive activities, because they were submerged with their karmas, their desires, everything is there. So they went. So just like this cycle of karma, it continues, and the desire continues life after life of Brahma for a living entity. Wherever we left off, we will be submerged within the body of Mahavishnu, Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu, and from there we will again continue our fruitive desires. Right? So, actuated by the energy called Kala Shakti, and he saw his transcendental body as bluish. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that the Kala Shakti is mentioned in Vishnu Puran as is avidya. This is the avidya. And by this symptom, one is continuously working for a fruitive mentality. I will do this and this will happen. I will do this will happen. Bhavishyapi punardhanam. This is how the mentality of the fruitive worker. And they are called as mudha. Why? Because it is not the worker are called as mudha. Because this enjoying mentality that I will work hard, party harder. This is the mudha mentality, right? So the Prabhupada says the foolish living entities, they are very, very enthusiastic to work for some temporary benefit. One has to work very hard, right? Prabhupada was working extremely hard. But age appropriate, again, one has to work very hard in one's profession, varnashram, everything. But the goal has to be connection to the Supreme Lord. And later one has to retire from this hard work of the material life and work very hard in the spiritual domain as well. But sometimes the living entity may think that he is very clever and amassing great wealth for the generation and taking the risk of all types of sinful activities. Because whenever you are in the pursuit of excessive money earning, the sin is always going to be there. And that's why the Vaishya class is supposed to perform huge charitable activities so that they can at least part of the papa they can counter with some punya, but the cycle perpetually goes on. And all this, the perpetual shackle, the polluted mentality and the material sins, they aggregate the combination of living entities that appear to be bluish. Prabhupada says such an impetus of the activity for the fruitive result is made possible by the dictation of the external energy of the Lord, which is called as Kala Shakti. Here is referred as Kala Shakti. Text 13. तस्यार्थ सूक्ष्मन् अभिनिविष्ट दृष्टेर अंतर्गतोर्थो रजसातनीयान् गुणेन कालानुगतेन विद्धः सुष्यन्तदा विद्यतनाभिदेशात्. Translation.
The subtle subject matter of creation on which the Lord's attention was fixed, was agitated by the material mode of passion, and thus the subtle form of creation pierced through his abdomen.
So when Lord was in this position, Lord pushed through, this is what we see, all these living entities along with their aggregate karmas in their subtle bodies, and that form of creation pierced through his abdomen, through the navel. That's what we see as the navel. Text 14. Sapadmakosho sahatod udishtat kalena karma pratibodhanena swarochisa tat salilam vishalam vidyotanarkar iva atmayonihi. Translation.
Piercing through this sum total form of the fruitive activity of the living entities took the shape of the bud of a lotus flower, generated from the personality of Vishnu, and by his supreme will it illuminated everything like the sun and dried up the vast waters of devastation. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So now, piercing through the sum total form of the fruitive activity of the living entities took shape of the bud of the lotus flower generated from the personality of Garbhodakaśāyī Viṣṇu. And by his supreme will, it illuminated everything like sun and dried up the vast waters of devastation. Right. So now here is the formation of lotus here, and that is being formed here. Now soon Brahmaji is going to take birth and he is being bewildered that what is the goal of his life, and that is how this discussion narration is going to continue. Next we enter the third section, text 15 to 23, Brahmaji's birth and his search for the absolute truth. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone. Hare
Prabhupada.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhupada. Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhupada. Thank
Prabhuji.
you,
Hare
Prabhuji. Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone.